Aloha, this is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing screenwriter, comic book writer, podcaster Rylend Grant. Now, Rylend is a screenwriter by trade. For the last 15 years, he's been writing film and TV projects for the folks like J.J. Abrams, Ridley Scott, Justin Lin, John Woo. I'm going to try to pronounce this director's name as best I can. Luc Besson and F. Gary Gray. And later on in the podcast, we're going to talk about his cool sci-fi movie that's going to be coming out sometime soon, starring Emile Hirsch later this year. And he's currently working on a TV show with, I'm going to try to pronounce the actor's name, Davy Diggs. He's from Hamilton, and he's one of the lead actors in Snowpiercer. Is that correct?
He's the lead, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then his new comic, Suicide Jockeys, #1, is from Swords Point Press and is in stores right now. And Rylend, basically, when this episode airs, it's going to probably come out probably within the next couple of weeks. So that's why I said that, yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
Rylend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
No, thank you very much. And before I go into Rylend's history, I just want to say, a big shout out to Rylend. Rylend, thank you very much for your patience. Usually I try to send my stuff out a couple of days before the interview. I wasn't feeling too good. I've been emailing Rylend back and forth. Rylend has been very kind and generous. So Rylend, thank you very much for your patience and understanding. Thank you very much.
No, it's not needed at all. I'm delighted when I receive anything from an interviewer or a podcaster. Usually it's just make a date, shoot from the hip. So you are light years ahead of everyone else in terms of your preparation. So no apologies necessary.
No, I have to. Honestly, I have to be prepared. If not, man, it's like it's going to go all over the place. So
yeah. No, it's good.
Thank you very much.
And appreciate it.
No, thank you. And then, okay, so Rylend's history. Now, as I mentioned that, Rylend is a screenwriter. Now Rylend's work has also included, he's co-written Coach Thief for the website Popcorn Fiction. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you co-write that you co-wrote it with someone else, right?
Yeah, I have for my film and TV stuff, I write with a guy named Vikram Arnekian. And yeah, we've written together for about 12 years now, and so we've written a ton of film and TV together, but we also write fiction together, and so we got in the business I don't know, 8 years ago of Hollywood made this turn where when we started writing together, you could write you had an idea, you wrote a screenplay, and if it was good, you sold it. That was how it was. And we did that for a couple of years. And then the financial crisis happened right around the time the writer's strike happened. Mm-hmm. Hollywood completely remakes the way they do business. And that coincides with the IP revolution, which is, we've entered this period of Hollywood where everything needs to be based on something. Every movie you see is based on a book, a video game, a comic book, whatever. And so, so I don't know, 8 years ago, after a couple of lean years, we finally got wise, and we're like, okay, well, if Hollywood wants IP, why don't we give them IP? And so the first idea we did this with was this thing called Thief Coach, and we took an idea that we previously would have written as a spec script, meaning you're writing it on your own, you're not getting paid for it. We knew we couldn't sell it as a pitch, we knew we couldn't sell it as a script, so we wrote it as a short story. We got the short story published, and then kind of overnight we had a bidding war for the short story. We had Justin Lin on one side coming off Fast and Furious 6, which was at that time and may still be the largest opening in Universal summer history. And then we had Brett Ratner and Robert De Niro on the other side. And I think Tyler Perry made an offer for it. There were, it was really competitive and really interesting. And so we sold that in a competitive situation. It was pretty high profile. And our reps kind of thought it was a fluke, and we knew it wasn't a fluke. We knew this is where the business was heading. And so short and sweet, we've done it like, I don't know, I think 7 or 8 times since with short stories. So yeah, a lot of short stories on my on my credits list. And then, yeah, most recently, this TV series you alluded to, starring Daveed Diggs that we just sold to Lionsgate, was based on a short story that we wrote also. So that has kind of become our business. Generating IP and then getting paid to write it in Hollywood, and now we're doing it with comic books.
Yes.
My first comic book, Aberrant, we set it up as a TV series. I think 2 weeks before the second issue hit comic shops. So moving along.
So yeah, so Aberrant, so that was now that was like a 10-issue political action thriller that was from Action Lab that came out in 2018. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, at the 2019 Ringo Awards, it won the fan favorite award for favorite villain. And also, too, Aberrant, you were nominated for Best Writer at the 2019 Ringo Awards, alongside with Brian Michael Bendis, Jeff Lemire, Scott Snyder, and Brian K. Vaughan, right?
Yeah. That was a trip. It was it was like me and for 4 first ballot Hall of Famers. So it was interesting to go down to the 2019 Ringo Awards and just kind of be the weirdo that was like sitting in a boat with all those guys. It was it was pretty funny. Like, who the hell is this guy? But yeah, I was there. And we were nominated. Yeah, we were nominated for 2 Ringo Awards on that, and then we won one for best villain. Yeah.
But but the thing is, but by this time, like I said, it was like the 2019 Ringo Awards. Already, you're a screenwriter. You've been writing short stories for a number of years already. So so basically, it's like you paid your dues, and it's like now you're at you can sit at that table. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that must have been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to be embraced like that by the comics community, by the comics Illuminati, I guess you'd say, and to have it happen so quickly into my comics career. I mean, comics were always my passion.
Yes.
I mean, more than anything, I wanted to write comics. I tried to do a comic when I was back in college, but that was kind of, it was a while ago, and more so than the number of years ago it was like technologically a long time ago, so basically back then, you didn't have like digital workflow and this global community that was so accessible. I mean, you had to like know an artist in your town. You're dealing with physical drawings, revisions take forever, and now cut to like a few years later, and I mean, it's we have digital workflow, like revisions happen in a second. Huge files are traded via Dropbox. I have 4 titles right now in some version of production, and I have artists working for me in Mexico, in Brazil, in Hungary. My go-to colorist is in Indonesia. My letterer is in the UK. I pay them all via PayPal. I haven't met any of them in person. Some of them I haven't even talked to via Zoom because English isn't their first language.
Yeah.
You have these massive, if you go to Facebook and you go to like connecting comic book writers and artists, you have these massive groups where all these people just kind of meet and chat, and artists are throwing their work up and saying, "Hey, I need a job. Somebody hire me." It is a wonderful time to be doing this, and it's never been easier isn't the right word, because this shit is never easy, but it's never been more possible to get your comic book made. And so that was part of it, was I finally took the comics plunge, after, I don't know, I guess about 12 years or a decade plus of writing movies and TV shows, because and I guess because I finally could. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to continue on. I'm going to touch on a couple more. And correct me if I'm wrong, you had another from Action Lab. Now, I'm going to try to pronounce the title best I can. Banjax?
Banjax. Yeah, Banjax.
Banjax. And then that was also nominated for a Ringo Award too, and that was nominated for Best Series, along, and then was that in 2019 or 2020?
Yeah, 2019. It was nominated for four, actually. It was nominated for best cover artist, best colorist, best letterer, and then we were nominated for best series, and alongside Something's Killing the Children and
Bitterroot.
Bitterroot, Black Hammer. So yeah, again, that was like that was another like Hall of Famers lineup, and then us. So yeah, that was cool. But yeah, Banjax is kind of a dark superhero noir, sort of a kind of twisted take on a Batman and Robin story. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. So I was just gonna real quickly. So if people are trying to look for like, well, where can I get these trade? If they're available in trade, go to your local comic shop, order them. I think you have and I'm going to ask about your social media link, your social media platforms, but I know in one of your social media links, you have a link to the Amazon webpage, I think, to buy those.
Well, yeah, I have an Amazon authors page, so
Okay.
you can just search my name, Rylend Grant, on Amazon. But yeah, Banjax and Aberrant are available, in fine comic shops everywhere, and via Amazon and Comixology and all the places. Yeah, and then I have two other books that I kickstarted, and we'll have traditional publishing homes fairly soon. But if you want to get your hands on it now, I have a kind of a dark astral projection thriller called The Jump,
Yes.
which is great, and a Fargo-esque crime drama called The Peacekeepers. And those are available. I kickstarted those originally, but those are available now via BackerKit. So if you go to thejump2.backerkit.com, that's the jump, one word, and the number two, thejump2.backerkit.com. You find all those there, and then you can find kind of signed copies for Aberrant and Banjax, and kind of rare con variants. You can see them behind me. I know the people listening can't, but so it's kind of a one-stop Rylend Grant shop. So if you're looking for if you're looking for the coolest Rylend Grant stuff, hit the BackerKit shop up. And I mean, with obviously we've been away from cons for so long. It is, I guess, still right now the only way to get a signed copy of anything from me. So yeah, find your way over there. There's cool stuff.
Okay. Now, Rylend, I'm going to ask, did I miss anything?
I did not. No, I don't think so. Yeah, you covered it pretty well.
All right. Now, I also want to give a big mahalo or a thank you in Hawaiian to Joshua Warner of Source Printing Press for arranging this interview. And Joshua, thank you very much for giving me an advanced PDF copy of Suicide Jockeys, #1. Thank you very much. All right. So, Rylend, let's see. Where can listeners follow you on social media?
I am at Rylend Grant on all forms of social media. That's RYLENDGRANT. I always spell it because it's not a real name. My parents just kind of drunkenly arranged letters and saddled me with it, and so now I have to spell it for you guys. So at Rylend Grant on all forms of social media. Twitter, Instagram is probably the best place to find me. But
all right, and then now, Rylend, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a housing project in Detroit, Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, now, listeners, please remember that he grew up in Detroit, because in issue #1, that kind of sort of plays like not a, how should I say it? It's Rylend's, he still loves Detroit. And it shows on one of the characters. So,
it comes up. I mean, it comes up over and over again. I mean, Denver, our protagonist in Suicide Jockeys, he's from Detroit, and he wears his Detroit pride proudly. And and his his ship is actually named Zeke after Isaiah Thomas, who was the captain of the 88-89 Detroit Pistons, the bad boys team. So. A lot of overt references, a lot of subtle references, but yeah, I fly that Detroit flag in this book, and in most books, one way or another. But yeah.
Oh, but that's pretty cool. Okay, so what was the first comic that you read?
That's an interesting question. I think so when I was a tyke, I had a babysitter who had a she did a bowling league every week, And so I would go with her and
Hmm.
I would, play the video games or whatever while she bowled with her team.
Yes.
And at some point, and only for a few months, a comic shop opened up in like the corner of the bowling alley pro shop.
Hmm.
It was called Web Comics, and that was kind of my first my first like Zen comic master. You walk in and
Yes.
it's like, yeah, let me introduce you to this wonderful stuff. And at that point, he tried some of the superhero stuff on me, and it wasn't really sticking. What got me was a comic book called Reed Fleming, the World's Toughest Milkman, um, which
Oh, yeah.
which you should pick up if you haven't. And it is it is it's a black and white, like really kind of rough around the edges indie comic from those days that um I mean, it's kind of like in the cool indie band or something like that, but it was about a Bukowski-esque kind of drunken milkman who just sort of careened through town and caused havoc. And there was IDW does these really amazing collected editions that are almost like works of art in themselves. IDW released a very amazing Reed Fleming collected edition that you can just grab on Amazon now, and you should totally grab it. But yeah, I mean, it was like you pick up a lot of stuff off the rack and just like the standard superhero fare of
Yes.
the day. I mean, some of it was cool, and of course there was great stuff back then. You really kind of had to like you needed somebody to guide you through it. And later in life, I had those people that introduced me to I mean, like Marvel made Iron Man an alcoholic in the 70s. You know what I'm saying? Like that stuff was mind blowing and amazing, and it really influenced me more than anything. Um, but a lot of it was okay. Well, superhero bad guy, they punch each other for a couple of pages and then
Yes.
move on, and that wasn't so interesting to me. And that's the beauty of like an amazing comic book store owner, right? Clerk or whatever you want to call them. They can. There is something for everybody in a comic shop,
Yes.
and he very quickly got a sense of where I was, in my development as a person, and he's like, yeah, this is really going to appeal to this kid, and it blew my mind. It was just awesome, you just saw you didn't see this sort of stuff on TV.
Hmm.
You saw like what a story could be, and the corners you could push into, and the sort of the characters you could examine, and the fun you could have, and I was hooked then, and I've been hooked for a long time.
Ah, okay. No, but that, and I'm going to ask, so, if you don't mind, what was the time period that you grew up in? Because I'm just trying to, was it the late 80s, early 90s, or?
Yeah, that's about right. And I first, I first ended up in a comic shop proper after that. It was the death of Superman,
Yes.
that got that got me back in the door after the Reed Fleming brush, like a lot of rubes. But I was lucky in that the image revolution was happening, at that point. That It was around that time too that Vertigo really took off and started doing some really interesting, challenging stuff, and those were the books that were really formative. Preacher and 100 Bullets, and some of the stuff they were doing with Hellblazer and John Constantine back then, and of course, like I said, I found the back issue bins, and that's when you look at that Demon in a Bottle arc,
Yes.
with Iron Man and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, you will find in a lot of my books kind of revel in this late 80s, early 90s nostalgia,
Uh-huh.
more so than, I mean, they're very obviously comics that have influenced me and inspired me to do this.
Mhm.
But I mean, I was again, I grew up in a I grew up in a housing project in Detroit. Like the examples around me were not great, right? If I had sort of followed those examples, I'd still be back. Who knows? I might be dead. I don't know what, but most of the people that I grew up with, they're still there. They were born, they're going to live, and they're going to die, all within about 10 miles, which is fine for them. It wasn't for
Yes.
me. With comics, with TV, I saw what else was out there, and what a person could be. I mean, the TV very much raised me. Like I learned right and wrong from Captain Picard and not from the people around me, like you're supposed to. But what has influenced me in my work more than anything are those late 80s, early 90s action movies. So you'll see Die Hard, you'll see Beverly Hills Cop, you'll see Karate Kid, you'll see those are the things that were really kind of soul food to me. They spoke to me. And so yeah, those are, you start talking influences, and that's where I'm at. And you actually see all those things. I've become, I don't know if famous is the right word, or infamous for all my books. For my I do these kind of crazy variant covers that are kind of tributes to these movies.
Yes.
Yeah, we've made some splashes with some of them. I mean, Aberrant, we had a Coming to America cover that was, all over the internet, that people flipped for. We had a Karate Kid cover. We had a Top Gun Playing with the Boys volleyball scene cover that people loved. And, Banjax, we did a Rocky IV variant cover that people loved, and a Gremlins cover. And then, even on my Kickstarter books, like we had for the Jump, we just had a Back to the Future cover that everybody needed to get a hold of, and a Mandalorian cover. And so yeah, I mean, it's nostalgia is a very powerful force in my life, and I think in everybody's life. And so I think that my readers and I really kind of connect and commiserate over all of that.
I'm going to ask. I'm going to go a little bit off the cuff. I'm going to ask, did you want it to be a screenwriter first, or did you want to? I mean, we talked about it a little bit before our interview, but did you want it to be a screenwriter? Did you want it to be a writer or a screen? How did that come about? Like, do you want it to be a writer? Did you want it to be a certain type of writer? I know you wanted to write comics, so.
Yeah, I should have known that. I did know deep down that I wanted to be a writer from, that I wanted to tell stories.
Yeah.
From the moment I was, I could see or speak probably. We talked about this. I'm speaking to you from the office that I write in, and you can see, but the listeners can't, that I'm surrounded by old toys. And old pop culture stuff.
Wait, no, let me correct you. They are not old toys. They are action figures, and they're very collectible pop culture. So if any collector's wife is listening to this, these are not toys.
Yeah, there you go. Well, they started out as toys for me. I mean, I told these amazing, vivid, stories, character pieces with my toys when I was a kid. And so it started back then. And so again, the greatest stories I ever told, I told back then with my action figures, quote unquote. And so now I write in an office surrounded by this stuff, and they kind of, speak to me in some weird, karmic way, and inspire me still. So yeah, I mean, I was telling stories from the moment one, and I was, the kid that, I had a column, and I was the editor of my school newspaper, but I did all the movie reviews. I had a column where, it was all about kind of telling the stories of the school and all that stuff. And it looked like you had a question. What were you going to say?
No.
Yeah. And so, however, as a kid in Detroit, a dirtbag kid in a, Detroit housing project or whatever, like the idea of growing up to make movies seemed like, a fucking fairy tale. Like, I would also like to be the captain of the Enterprise, and those are the same to me. So I never really entertained it. And so growing up, my dad kind of pushed me towards politics. I mean, he had me standing on standing at a polling place on a street corner with a sandwich board, campaigning for, I think it was H.W. Bush back then. My dad was very conservative. And I did something for every major and local election until I graduated high school. I went to the University of Michigan. I ended up with a scholarship to the University of Michigan to study political science. I was going to be a political operative, and I actually came within a hair of going to the Naval Academy. With all the political work I did, I had a congressional appointment. I was set to go to the Naval Academy, and then kind of 11th hour, Michigan comes in with a scholarship offer, and my dad, who was a Vietnam veteran, is like, look, if you want to go into the military after this, it's fine, but you're kind of an idiot if you don't take the scholarship. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and then I went to Michigan. And Michigan is kind of one of the most liberal institutions in the in the world. It's kind of Berkeley East or whatever. And there's no need to get into a political discussion here, but the lesson to take is just like, well, I grew up with one point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and then my world expands. I'm exposed to this other point of view, and I just realized very quickly and very violently that the world is not black and white,
Yes.
right? And so that was that was tough, and there was a lot of other stuff going on in my life, and I'm kind of away from home for the first time, and the world just got a lot bigger. The world was the size of a Dixie cup, and then suddenly I'm swimming in this ocean. And it was right around that time that, I mean, politics has always been an ugly, contradictory void, right? But it started to get, I mean, what we're looking at now started back then. It was starting to get really ugly, and politics was no longer about helping people and governing. It was about this weird fight between these people who have lined up on two different sides for no reason. And it wasn't about helping or actually accomplishing anything. It was just about winning. And if you couldn't win, it was about making sure the other guy didn't win. And it was terrible, and it was depressing, and it was awful, and I was livid about it. And so I had this kind of catastrophic nervous breakdown sort of thing middle of my freshman year of college. And it was almost like a cliche you'd see in like a bad student film or something like that, where fell out completely one night, and then just spent an entire night walking around campus.
Mm-hmm.
Walked in, and the moment that I'm going to date myself here, but the moment our telephone registration system opened up, I walked back into my dorm room. I dropped all of my classes that I was set to take for the second semester, which was, 3 poli-sci classes and a social class or something. Dropped them all, grabbed a course guide. And this is like the day before, the semester is supposed to start or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Start flipping through. And I'm like, what is going to make me happy? What am I interested in? I literally have every possibility at my fingertips here. What do I want to do? What is going to make me happy? And I ended up registering for 2 film classes, a theater class, and an environmental science class. And a couple of years later, I graduated the University of Michigan with a triple major in film, theater, and art history. Couple of months that I was working for his company, and I was, making copies and getting coffee and stuff like that. And but I just made it a point to, there were other interns, but I made it a point to like work twice as hard as all of them put together. And then a few months in, Oliver came back from a long vacation, and it was time to start prepping Any Given Sunday. And they needed somebody to kind of be Oliver's shadow during the prep and everything. And they're like, well, who should do it? And it's like, hey, how about that kid that has been working twice as hard as everyone else? And so they stuck me next to Oliver. And so I was just over his shoulder while he was prepping Any Given Sunday and doing all the casting, and in meetings with him and the cinematographer while they're talking about, okay, well, football's been shot, like dog shit for decades. Like, how do we make it affecting and make it look awesome? I was, sitting in the background while he's sitting there with Al Pacino arguing over, where's my character here and there, and what are the thematics of this thing, and we need to do this better. And was there when Jamie Foxx replaced Puff Daddy because Puff Daddy couldn't take a snap under center, and it was interesting. I mean, it was you learn a lot at AFI, but I think I learned twice as much just being there, and then also was like, was kind of part of the development machine there while he was partnered with a producer named Dan Halstead, who produced a lot of interesting movies. But I was there while they did Art of War and Corruptor, and Alexander was in early development then, and just a lot of movie making happening, and I was 19 years old or something like that, and it was really an education.
I'm sorry, I'm going off the cuff here. I know we need to talk about Suicide Jockeys, but Rylend, I just, what popped into my head when you said, you're this intern, you want to, really stand out. And I know you're a Star Trek: The Next Generation fan. It reminded me of that scene in Tapestry where Picard's a lieutenant, where Q, has him as a lieutenant,
Yeah.
and he comes to Commander Riker and he goes, how do I become captain? And Riker goes, you have to stand, you have to stand out in a crowd. You have to do this. You have to do that. And,
they can't see it, but I'm pulling out my copy of Tapestry that's just sitting here. Yeah.
Because
Nice reference.
Yeah, because I mean, because going the extra mile got you noticed at age 19. That's incredible. And for you to sit in a room with Oliver Stone and Al Pacino, hearing Al Pacino, and I'm sure they're arguing back and forth. Like you said, Al Pacino's trying to figure out his character. That you must be going, oh my God, I can't believe this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I don't know, seeing two like grand chess masters or something like that. Yeah, it was it was really interesting. I mean, there was a lot of awe at first, because again, I'm a kid and these are heroes of mine and stuff like that. But it's amazing how quickly you kind of get used to it, and it becomes ho hum that you're you still geek out from time to time. It's weird. It's like, okay, well, James Woods is in today, but that's fine. But I end up really geeking out when Elizabeth Berkley was in the film, and Oliver was always running behind. And so Elizabeth comes in and he's an hour behind or something like that, and so I have to hang out with Elizabeth Berkley for an hour or an hour and a half, and so we're just sitting in the conference room shooting the shit, and I'm a 19-year-old kid, and this is Jesse from Saved by the Bell, And so I was fine when I was in a room with Al and Oliver arguing about character and thematics, but put me in a room with Jesse from Saved by the Bell when I'm a 19-year-old kid and I'm a complete mess. So yeah, it was that was overwhelming and like a massive shock to the system early on. It was a good education because at 24. Mm-hmm. As I had to walk in to the Chateau Marmont and pitch a story to Penelope Cruz and get myself hired over the like 10 seasoned like 40-year-old screenwriters that were walking in and pitching her ideas, and convince her that I was the guy that needed to write with the Academy Award-winning director. And so could I have done that if I had not gone through all of this like craziness before? I don't think so. But I walked in, and again, like it's Penelope Cruz, and she's like glowing and awesome, and there's a thing initially, but I could very quickly settle into a place of comfort and do that, and that's helped me through my entire career, because again, it's like, okay, well, I need to sit down with Ridley Scott and talk and argue with him over this script. You know what I'm saying? Like I need to sit down and convince him that I'm right about this and that he's wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing. I think I've been lucky enough to like get the jobs that I've gotten and do the work that I've done because I'm willing to do that. You know what I'm saying? Most people are yes men, right? And they'll be just, oh yeah, you're right, Ridley. Yeah, let's do that instead. I'm not that guy, and I've maybe not gotten jobs or lost jobs because I'm not that guy, but I think that I've gotten further because I am that guy, and because I am interested in what's best for the story, what's best for the movie, the comic book, whatever. And I'm not going to be a complete asshole about it. Again, Ridley's going to make the decision, right? And when he makes the decision, I'm not going to pout about it. I'm not going to do anything like that. But my duty is to the story, and so if I think I can improve this thing, it's my job to convince him, and to convince him in a way that isn't abrasive, and I need to package this in a way that he'll eat it up. I've gotten pretty good at it. If I feel adamant about something, I get my way about 90% of the time, even with, the Academy Award-winning director that I'm sitting across the table from. I think that's a skill. If I have one best skill, maybe that's it.
But the other thing, to me, it just sounds like it's it it's basically earning people's respect. Yeah, to me, that's what it sounds like. And then, like you
Yeah.
said too, it's like, you'll argue your point to, because the story is the key thing. But if the director says, no, I want to do it this way, that's my decision, then you're kind of okay, and you know when to step back, which is good,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like the pick and choose your battles type
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
I guess.
No, and you're 100% right that it is totally about earning respect, and it's a powerful place once you've earned somebody's respect like that. Because you'll be in a room, directors are surrounded by people, and you'll be in a room with 20 people, right?
Yes.
And they're trying to make a tough decision, and there are a couple of people that have their opinions or whatever, and when you've earned that respect, that's when that director will then be like, hey Riley, what do you think? You know what I'm saying? And that's, I mean, that's again, it's a powerful place to be in. It is a they're embracing you, they're letting you know that they trust you, that your opinion is valued, and you have to earn that position, absolutely. And you don't earn that position by bullshitting or by kowtowing or anything like that. It's like once they realize that you have that you're coming at this from a good place and from an intelligent place, and a place where you've carefully considered everything, they will then trust you. And a lot of times when they do that, what they're looking for is they're looking for you to challenge them. They're looking for a dissenting opinion. And you know what I mean, most of these guys and gals, they didn't get to where they are by not weighing everything. You know what I'm saying? Like a guy like Oliver Stone, a woman like Penelope Cruz, the Al Pacinos of the world, any of these people, they see the game from all of the angles. You know what I'm saying? And in fact, you can, but filmmakers often have this arc, right, where they have this kind of stratospheric climb, and then at some point they get to this place where no one can tell them no anymore. They stop listening to people. They're lost in their own genius, and that's usually when their career goes to shit, right? We see it over and over again in every in every business, in every art, and every whatever. The smart ones don't lose that, and I think it's important.
Oh, yeah. So, Rylend, I'm sorry. I'm going to start kind of like, it was great. That was great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just wish we could talk about that a little bit more. But our
Yeah.
focus on the interview today is I'm going to just go into the Suicide Jockeys. What is the premise of this story?
So Suicide Jockeys, I guess short and sweet, is tokusatsu for the rabid American action movie fan. And then in a nutshell, it is Fast and the Furious meets Voltron, but kind of with an extra dollop of heart and soul. I mean, I think I said this to you before we got started, but kind of at its heart, it's a sort of Boogie Nights-esque dissection of a non-traditional family. So there's a lot of that kind of good hard-hitting character stuff, but it's also kind of great bonkers howl at the moon action. We've talked about how movies and things kind of influence me with this stuff. You can see it, but again, the people listening can't. There is I have a kind of an old janky VHS setup behind me. There's an old VHS player and a CRT TV there.
I'm sorry, is it still working, the VHS?
Oh yeah. And so that's what I do is this cabinet that you see below me is just full of VHS tapes. And in fact, like I have a lot of them from a lot of them I just have the original Blockbuster tapes. This is like a Blockbuster video copy of Reservoir Dogs, but I have, I don't know, probably about 100 of these Blockbuster tapes. But so while I'm writing, I will just throw something on the VCR, and it's again a nostalgic thing for me. It's like that was how I watched these movies originally.
Yes.
And so I want that feeling again while I'm doing it, and so I walk in. Okay, what's the tape of the day? I'm going to throw this in. Let me throw in Rocky IV today.
Yes.
and let it play. And then I just go about my business. And I know these movies so well that it just doesn't, whenever I look over, it's like a familiar scene or whatever. And so as I was, as I was prepping this, I mean, there was the obvious tokusatsu influence. There is the obvious Fast and the Furious influence. One of my claims to fame is that I've actually written for the directors of 6 of the 9 Fast and the Furious movies. Um, so I definitely have that part of the equation covered. But as I was kind of as this thing was manifesting, what I found myself putting in the VCR more often than not, and what really ended up kind of like seeping in by osmosis and really kind of inspiring me on this thing, was there is this subgenre of action movie that we saw during the late 90s actually. And it was all about kind of like machismo and swagger, and it was these like really testosterone swaggery swinging dick kind of heroes. And I'm talking about films like Face Off. What's that?
Roadhouse.
Well, Roadhouse is a little earlier,
Face Off.
yeah. But Roadhouse is one of my primary influences. Period. And we can talk a lot about Roadhouse, and we can talk about the Roadhouse variant cover that is available for issue 1 of Suicide Jockeys that everyone should go out and get.
Yes.
But more than anything, in terms of the drama and the character of this, I'm talking about these 90s action movies like Face Off, like The Rock, like Con Air, like Armageddon. These big bad, unapologetically like testosterone action movies. And I started from that place. And so Suicide Jockeys, it takes place on kind of two time frames, right? There's 10 years ago, you had this team of these monster fighting badasses. They go to complete this mission. It goes horribly wrong, and they lose one of their team members, right? They lose the mother figure, basically. 10 years later, everything's fallen to shit. These guys haven't talked to each other since then. Everybody's in their own little corners. The family's broken up. Somebody steps out of the shadows and says, hey, that thing that went wrong 10 years ago, I think we can fix it. Here's how. And then Denver, our protagonist, our kind of swaggery swinging dick action hero right out of one of these movies, he has to slap the family together. He has to put the team back together and ride off to save mom, right? And so there was this interesting study here where our protagonist Denver is, he is one of these heroes out of like a late 90s Michael Bay movie or a late 90s Simon West movie. But now 10 years later, he is in the here and now, where we are socially conscious and we are overly PC and we are all of these things. And he is very much a man out of time. It is hard for him to exist in this current environment. And he messes up a lot. And he falls flat on his face any number of times, but he's ultimately coming from a good place. He is coming from he is trying to put his family back together. He is trying to save the woman he loves. He is trying to save all of humanity and time and space. In fact, and so that's what it's about. But there's a really interesting, meaty kind of intellectual story behind this thing. Now that we've talked about all of the kind of goonish influences that we have, so this was co-conceived with another person named Brad Warner. And so one of the I guess one of the things that didn't come up in your intro, one of the lines in my bio that kind of too often doesn't get its due, is that I happen to be an ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk. I guess I've really kind of been exploring this stuff for 20 plus years, but I've seriously been a Zen Buddhist for 15, and was, I don't know, ordained 10, 12 years ago or something like that. It doesn't mean much, but that I meditate a lot and teach other people meditation, and every a couple of times a year we go off into the mountains for a retreat or whatever. But Soto Zen is a Japanese sect, and so because of that, I have a lot of these kind of oddball Japanese connections, and I work in the film business, so I have a lot of oddball connections in the Japanese film business because of that. So one of these connections happens to be this guy Brad Warner, who is another ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk, who is a kind of a has had a storied writing career himself. He is kind of one of the American Zen writers. He's written probably about a dozen books and sold hundreds of thousands of copies and stuff like that. But his best known book is a book called Hardcore Zen,
Okay.
which is a great book, kind of the American Zenese technical manual. I highly recommend it. That's on Amazon and in bookstores everywhere and all that stuff. But great book. But Brad and I would, Brad's other, Brad's day job for a long time was he was an American who lived in Japan, and he worked for a company called Zubaraya Productions, which was founded by the man who created Godzilla. And they've have for decades created great tokusatsu fare. They are best known for doing all the Ultraman TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
And of course Ultraman is like the biggest tokusatsu in the world, essentially. And so yeah, for about a dozen years Brad was working as a producer and executive on Ultraman and other shows. But Brad and I met each other years later, and we would go, we were kind of in the same Zen circle, and we would twice a year go up to the Mount Baldy Zen Center and go on these retreats, for days on end. And we were in silence for the most part, but when we were allowed to talk, we would get to talking about just stuff we love. We love the same kind of movies, and we both kind of grew up in our like local UHF stations played weird tokusatsu fare at noon on Saturdays or whatever, and we both were kind of mesmerized by it, and him more than me, I guess, because he grew up to, as soon as he could, basically he had the same fallout I did, but he moved to Japan,
Mm-hmm.
learned the language, and went to work for one of these companies making these things, actually. So yeah, so Brad and I, it was years of discussion, and it was like, okay, well, why doesn't, tokusatsu has a following in the States, but it's kind of niche, it's kind of cultish.
Mm-hmm.
And why hasn't it like hit like it has not everywhere else necessarily, but in Asia, it is the biggest thing.
Yes.
Why doesn't it get its due here? Why isn't it cool like it should be? And so we just started to talk about, okay, well, what would that look like? Like, how do you make tokusatsu cool? How do you package it for the modern American action movie fan? And Suicide Jockeys is what we came up with, and we are an interesting pair because it's like, you talk about Fast and the Furious meets Voltron, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, for 15 years I've been writing like kick you in the teeth American action movies. Again, I've written for the directors of 6 of the 9 Fast and the Furious movies. I have that covered. On the Voltron side, Brad has been producing, shows like Voltron for a dozen years,
Mm-hmm.
and we just got together on it. And so I'm giving you a loud, kick you in the teeth American action movie experience, and he's making sure that tokusatsu fans have an authentic experience, and that it feels like that, and that it gives the tokusatsu world its due, and that we have our Easter eggs and our nods to the hardcore fans, and we made a really good team on this thing. And then joining us is we have the same art team from Aberrant. Again, Aberrant. We won a Ringo Award with Aberrant. We were nominated for 2 others, and so this is a team that has been together for a good long while. We know how to tell a story together. And so yeah, it's just fun. It's the most fun I've had putting a comic together. And I think that's going to be immediately evident. But so more than that, more than just being fun, it's actually about something. Okay, so you have two Zen monks who put this thing together, right? And so we couldn't, and a lot of the roots of this thing were put together actually on Zen retreats and stuff like that. And it is a time travel story. It is a story about who we are and what the fabric of time and space and reality is. And so we couldn't help but talk about that through a Zen lens, right? And so it's maybe a little hyperbolic to say that we're kind of teaching Zen with this thing, like, and maybe that puts people off a bit. So that's not really it. But we're having like the same big existential questions that we wrestle with in our Zen practice, we are wrestling with here in this book, but in a really fun, heightened way. So who am I? What is this world, this universe we're a part of?
Yes.
Matters of space and time, and it's something you find. I mean, if you really if you go back and you you look at the teachings of Ehe Dogen, who was 800 years ago, who was the kind of the founder of Soto Zen.
Hmm.
He was wrestling with the same things that like modern physics wrestles with right now,
Hmm.
and he had very similar takes and views. I mean, what Einstein would do 800 years later, Dogen was doing back then, and that's really interesting. And so we're kind of having that conversation while we're giving you a Howl at the Moon, monster fighting extravaganza. So yeah, if you like a little, you like a little side salad with your nachos or whatever, that's what you're getting.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I think what's really great is that, like you said, that the story idea came up, you know, during your guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Zen retreats.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what it sounds like? It sounds like the stories came out from a quiet place, because if you guys had just gone to a bar, talked about there's just too many distractions there. It's just like at the retreat, it's like you guys are focused, it's centered. This is what, not only is it Fast and Furious meets Godzilla or Voltron,
Mm-hmm.
but like I said, it just sounds like there's a little more to the story, and there is, because like you said in the beginning, Denver deals with regrets, and you can see the spiral of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I'm reading the first issue, you see this, how one event in Denver's life really when I'm reading the story, you see the spiral downward spiral of Denver, especially when he's at these sort of conventions, at the comic book convention. And I have to say, I love the character Denver. He's great. I'm going to spoil one scene. I love him when he's on stage at a panel and his pants is like dropped down, and it's like, and
he goes on a Boone's Farm fueled tirade and calls the con organizers Jesus freaks. Yeah, it's a good scene. Yep.
I mean, but correct me if I'm wrong, but but it sounds, that's what I just think the premise of the story, where it came from, sounds great, and there's a little bit more meaning to the story too, as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with some really heavy character stuff. I mean, all of my writing ends up being about kind of getting my own demons, psychological and otherwise, into a room and kind of beating the shit out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is a story about regret and about family, and how as hard as you try, you can never really kind of put them out on the ice floe, right? Like when there are a handful of people in your life where no matter what has transpired, if they knock on your door and need help, you're going to let them in, right? Mm-hmm. You may have kicked them out of your house, but you'll never kick them out of your heart, right? And so yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's also a story about wrestling with PTSD, and there was a very positive review of the issue this morning in on monkeys fighting robots, excuse me, the very good comic website, and the reviewer there really he really picked up on something interesting, where it's like, this is about our obsession with escapism, right? That's really what I mean, the series itself, but this first issue is about, where it's like, okay, well, there's so much going on in our lives, both internally and politically and socially and all that stuff, and all of that ends up in this series. I mean, it's like, it's what's going on today, with this slight twist that there are also monsters,
Yes, yeah.
Which is pretty funny. But it's I mean, in a lot of ways, Denver's not dealing with any of it, right? He's just retreated into this cocoon, right? And the story getting started, it is about him being forced out of his cocoon and having to confront all of this stuff. But even when he confronts it, it's like, okay, well, this is too much and this is awful. Like, what if we can just go back and change it so we don't have to deal with any of this shit, and so it being, I mean, this is kind of a poem about the times of COVID, right? Where it's where we are all in these bunkers, and there is this hell happening outside one way or another. Again, like medically, socially, economically,
Yeah.
politically, in every way, and then in our own lives at home.
Yeah.
And so we're all looking for our way out, our escape. How do we shut it off for a minute
Mm-hmm.
or for an hour or forever?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and those are very serious things. And I think that there's an irony to that, because it's like, well, this is an action comic book about fighting monsters, and this is escapism at its best. But it's an escapist play. It is escapism about escapism.
Uh-huh.
There's a weird tension in that I
Yeah.
think is interesting, and it was nice to see the second reviewer to pick up the issue, be like, oh, I get this. This
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting. So that's cool.
That is cool. So, Rylend, I'm sorry, I'm going to continue on because I know time is. I'm trying to respect your time.
And
So,
horse.
um, I'm going to one last question about um, Suicide Jockeys.
Yeah.
How did you guys choose the movie poster homage covers? Because we already talked about Roadhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's about what strikes me in the moment. I mean, sometimes there's stuff that's fitting. We chose. I mean, in terms of Roadhouse, I knew I was going to do a movie homage cover. Like I'm known for them. They tickle me. They tickle the audience. That's what they expect and what they demand from me. It's about finding the right fit,
Yes.
and you know, um, uh, there was just something about. I mean, there's something about that image,
Yes.
that Roadhouse poster. Patrick Swayze. From Roadhouse, and that was kind of a karmic cousin of Denver.
Yeah.
And when we took Patrick Swayze out and put our character in, and I mean, it's spiritually, it's like a dead ringer. They're karmic cousins, and then there was something about the tagline too that just kind of fit. So really, that's what it's about. I mean, it's about pressing the right buttons with me, but also with the readers, with the audience. I mean, the bottom line is, like, if I like it, and like I have 2 or 3 friends that I'll just kind of show it to before, and if they're like, wow, then I know that I'm going to get the right response. But yeah, and it's like, again, it's like, I think that I mean, these were movies that excited me, and they made me want to do this sort of stuff. And so, I mean, I think it's nice to give them a nod and to pay tribute. I'm respecting my elders with this stuff. Respecting what came before.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, when I saw that cover, it's like, oh my God, I got to make sure I get that cover. I'm not blowing smoke at you because Roadhouse is one of those guilty pleasures. I'm not going to get too religious here because I'm a born again Christian. I've watched Roadhouse, the R-rated version. It's still, for me, that's one of the macho movies of all time. For me,
Yeah,
it is.
that's my Blockbuster. I don't know if you can see it. That's my copy of Roadhouse from Blockbuster way back when.
Oh my God.
I told you I had a lot of them, but yeah, Roadhouse is incredible. It's great. Yeah, I mean, it was actually, I don't know where it's going to go, but I have been for the last, I don't know, year or so, kind of talking with the folks at Silver about what Roadhouse might look like as a TV series.
Oh.
And do you do, I mean, I wouldn't be interested in a reboot at all, but like, what would happen if you kind of revisited that world, with
Yeah.
what's going on there now?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's that's one of the things that, like, probably will never happen, that I'm most excited about. But yeah, yeah, it's an amazing world, amazing character. It sucks that Patrick's gone, in terms of doing something like that, but yeah, I would love to revisit the world.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm going to continue moving on because I want to move on to your next project, that State of Consciousness.
Oh yeah.
Is that in post-production right now? And if you can tell us something about the story?
Yeah, we saw we saw the first cut of it last week, so it'll probably you'll probably see it. I mean, God, who knows with COVID if it'll be in a theater or on a streamer or something like that. Late this year or early next year. But yeah, it is a a kind of a sci-fi joint in the kind of sci-fi and genes in the vein of like Gattaca or Ex Machina. Kind of a psychological, mind fuck of a sci-fi story. Starring Emile Hirsch, directed by a guy named Marcus Stokes, who's a really talented guy who's kind of one of these guys. Like, you go on his IMDb and he's directed an episode of like every great TV show out there, and so he's he's the kind of guy that ends up he'll be directing a Marvel movie in 3 years or something like that. We're getting him at a good time. But yeah, it's again a film that I wrote with my film TV writing partner Deke Renner-Nekian, and so yeah, that was shot. We actually got that made and shot during the worst of COVID by some miracle. Shot in Italy and in Guatemala underneath an active volcano, actually, which made for some good social media posts. If you go on Emile Hirsch's Instagram account, you can actually see him just kind of step out of his trailer and video the active volcano that is seemingly a stone's throw away. There's smoke pouring out and stuff like that. So that's funny. But yeah, it's but that was cool. We were supposed to actually be in Italy and then Guatemala for all the shooting and stuff like that. About a few days before we were set to go, kind of Italy blew up COVID wise, and we ended up having to stay home. And then a few days after that, they closed the whole country down. And so it was good that we didn't go, because we would have been stuck there for a long time. And I have a 4-year-old at home who would have been very unhappy. But yeah, so that's going on. And as I alluded to when we were started talking in the green room, I have another film actually with Fernando Trueba, who I talked about earlier, that is set to shoot in Greece in the spring. And I'm supposed to go to Greece for that, but COVID is starting to look nasty again. So hopefully, hopefully the universe cooperates, right?
Yes, no, yes, and hopefully, because correct me if I'm wrong, because isn't Greece also having some crazy like forest fires over there? I can't remember.
I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't, with everything that's going on in the world, it would not surprise me in the least. Also I live in, Southern California, which is the forest fire capital of the world. So I just assume that there's always a forest fire.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about that. Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, is it like, are there any, is like the smoke from the forest fires, is it affecting your guys' neighborhood and area or anything like that?
No, we're not. We don't have anything right now that is affecting us, but it certainly has. It's seemingly more and more, more and more every year. We had a really bad one last year where it got pretty close, like maybe a 10-minute drive away or so. We weren't worried about the house catching fire, but the air quality got so bad that we seriously considered just leaving for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're kind of lucky. I used to live next to Griffith Park, and which is kind of the Central Park of Los Angeles. Just there's not like a lot of big open wooded area in Los Angeles. But that's definitely one of it. And yeah, Griffith Park caught fire at some point, years ago, and that was like coming up over the hill, and that's we could see fire, and that's when you start to worry. But yeah, other than that, it's just a lot of you come out in the morning and the air quality is terrible, and you got ash on your car, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that. I really am.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I didn't mean to do a little detour. I'm going to slowly wrap this up. Let's see. I'm going to jump into your podcast, the Writer's Block podcast. Let's see. I know it started in September of last year. Currently, there is about 42 episodes. I know your past guests, you have an incredible list of past guests, like you had Matt Fraction on, Stan Sakai. I'll be honest, I can't remember. I don't even know if he does. I think he rarely does interviews. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I know you had Kevin Eastman, John Lehman, Rodney Barnes, as you mentioned previously, Patrick Kennedy Johnson, Joe Duffy, and I know you've had Erica Schultz on, and also a friend of the show, David Pepples. So yeah, and then the writer's block. It is you and I'm going to try to pronounce David's last name, David Avalone.
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 Yeah. Avalone. Yeah.
Yeah.
David Avalone is another really talented comic creator. He is probably best known for doing. He does all of the Elvira comics at Dynamite right now. He's done Betty Page over there. Has done a bunch of other stuff. But he also co-created a book called Drawing Blood with Kevin Eastman. Who of course created Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But so Avalone is a great guy, one of my closest friends in comics, and so when COVID hit and cons stopped, Avalone and I started doing a lot of these kind of online cons together, and we got part of the con experience out of that, where we could do panels. You kind of bump into your friends or whatever, but it was only part of it. It was only part of the experience. Yes. And what we missed most about not having cons was like the creator camaraderie, what is often called BarCon, even though BarCon kind of has like a weird connotation now because you start to think of like creepy folks or whatever. But basically what happens is at the end of a long day on the con floor, the creators get together, they go to the bar, the restaurant across the street, and they all just shoot the shit for a couple hours. Right. And that was always the highlight of con for us. That was the best time, catching up with everybody and, trading barbs with people. And so we tried to create that sort of experience in a podcast sort of format. And so that's what we do. We get two of our friends in the business together, and so there are four of us at kind of a round table, and we start out with a comics business topic and start on that, and usually pretty quickly it kind of goes off the rails, and we end up arguing over like what our favorite Star Trek captain is or whatever. But it's always fun. It's always crazy. And we get into some very, I think, meaningful comics business discussions, like discussions about process and where the business is headed. And so it's not people, we don't have people on to kind of promote their books, and it's not one of these podcasts. There are great podcasts out there where people come on and kind of tell their story, like I'm doing now. Yeah. This is creators on to talk about a business thing. Yes. Let's I have we right after I record this, I'm actually hopping on, Avalone and are hopping on with Sean Lewis, who just wrote Kingspawn, which 500,000 pre-orders. Yeah. And Sean and I were at NYU together when we were 19. I've known Sean that long, and so we are doing a kind of career development discussion, like how do you go from this kind of 19-year-old goon? Sean was actually an actor back then. He was studying at the Stella Adler Conservatory. And so, now he just wrote maybe the biggest comic book ever, Yeah. And so what does that feel like? And how do you go from here to there, right? And it'll just be a lot of career development talk. Like, if, you want to grow up to write Spawn one day, what do you got to do? And how do you got to get lucky and all that stuff. So that'll be a great discussion, and that's kind of our bread and butter, and it's, it's a talk amongst friends, again, like, Avalone is one of my closest friends, just period. And Sean I've known since I was 19.
Yes.
And so, and he has Eastman on, and Eastman is his business partner, and so it's just, you get a level of discussion and a level of familiarity between people that you don't normally get. And so I think that's kind of the magic of this podcast. And people seem to be responding pretty well to it. I think this will be our 42nd episode. So, that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 guests. And it's usually four of us. Today's just Sean because I thought it merited that, and we're kind of trying this. Okay, well, what does it look like with one guest? But we've had we've done panels at cons together and recorded it, and we've had 5 people on with us or something like that. So always something a little bit different. But if you dig comics and you dig process and you're looking to get into the business, I mean, it's really aimed at creators or would be creators. So check it out if you're interested in that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And, listeners, I highly encourage you to check out the Writer's Block podcast. Like I said, over the weekend, I wasn't feeling too well. I was able to listen to a part of an episode. I think it's great, because Rylend, like you just said, it's just basically, you guys talk about the creative process. And like you said, too, what you touched upon, too, is that what I love is that you guys know each other. So there's not only that familiarity, but there's that comfort, too, where you guys can talk about process and so forth. Like I said, it's really great. It really is. So listeners, again, if you guys get a chance, please check out this podcast. One last question before I start wrapping up about the Writer's Block podcast. Who is the one guest you guys want to come on the show?
Yeah, wow. It's hard because it's like I feel like we've had most everybody. There are a couple of people that Howard Chaykin is a big one for us. I know him. He and Avalone have like an interesting relationship. Like they're close in a really interesting way. And Chaykin is a force of nature. Yes. And so Avalone has been a little bit hesitant isn't the right word. He wants to do it at the right time and under the right conditions because Chaykin can eat you alive if you don't take him seriously. I mean that in the best way. I'm saying like he is an intellectual force, and so we want to make sure that we are up to the up to the sparring match that will no doubt come. So in fact, like and I think Chaykin is his own episode. I don't think you pair Howard Chaykin with someone because and so we're kind of trying this thing with Sean where it's like, okay, well, it's the first time we've had one guest on. Yes. So let's see how this works, and then maybe and then maybe we're ready for Chaykin. So that's interesting. I mean, another one that I've been interested in is Matt Shackman is a friend of mine. Matt Shackman is a director who I worked with on a TV show a few years back, but then he directed a lot of the final season of Game of Thrones. He did that big dragon episode that everybody lost their shit over, and then he became this kind of mega star of a director. And then he directed the entire first season of WandaVision. That was all him, all those visuals. All of that stuff, and was an executive producer on it and everything like that. And so I would love to have Matt on and talk, Game of Thrones and WandaVision and all that stuff. Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, I'd love to have Matt on and talk WandaVision and talk Game of Thrones and what goes into. I mean, Matt started out as Matt was a child actor. He played JR on Just the 10 of Us. I don't know if you remember Just the 10 of Us, but it was about this. It was a spin-off of Growing Pains. The gym teacher in Growing Pains had this family, and he had I think he had 7 daughters and 1 son, and Matt Shackman was the son on the show Just the 10 of Us, and so he was JR on Just the 10 of Us, and then he became like kind of like the premier television director in the business. And so you talk about a journey again. He's just an interesting dude, and he's a nice dude, and he's a great dude, and he runs the theater here in Los Angeles and just has a lot of great insight. And so I'd love to get him on at some point, but he just signed on to do the new Star Trek movie. I mean, he's like busier than any human being imaginable. So it's one of these things where it's like, I don't, he doesn't have a spare minute. But I'll corner him at some point and get him on, but yeah.
All right, I'm going to start wrapping up because I know I'm going to start wrapping this up. Let's see. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
Yeah, I've been twice actually. My mom, my parents were divorced when I was 4, and my mom got remarried when I was 17. Mm-hmm. And so spent about 2 weeks in Hawaii, then Kanapali. Which was wonderful. And I'm like the biggest Magnum PI fan on the face of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you the audience can't see this, but you can see all my like crazy Magnum PI stuff. Um, my toys and my
Oh
yeah
yes.
yeah yeah. And so I'm the biggest, and so that so that was a thing, is I had to go and see the Magnum PI house, and do my do my little pilgrimages there. But also it was like, again, I was a dirtbag kid who grew up in Detroit, and I occasionally got down to Kentucky to see family or something like that. But Hawaii was really like my first.
Mm-hmm.
I am experiencing something. I'm experiencing this wide world in an interesting way, and it was there was it was a different culture, and a different climate,
Yes.
and not just the cultural stuff, but island living in general was so very different. And
Mm-hmm.
so and it was so much more, I don't know, it was so much more relaxed. There was a different way of approaching the day and stuff like that, and that was very refreshing and awesome for me. And then my wife and I guess shortly before we had our kid, one of her closest friends from college got married in Hawaii, and so we spent about a week there, and that was a great time. It was good to kind of be there with I mean, I wasn't a kid anymore. I was very much an adult, and I was with my wife at that point, so that was different. And we did the swimming with sea turtles, and just it's just I mean it's weird to me, because it's like there's so much stuff there that's just straight magical.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like yeah, but I just hop in the water and just go swim with a bunch of just massive turtles. Like that was earth shattering. That's like that's fantasy, that's like holodeck shit, and it's just like, it's just there all the time.
Uh-huh.
And there are way too many people that take it for granted. You know what I'm saying? There's this thing in where I live in Los Angeles, in Eagle Rock. There is this thing where there is a horde of feral parrots
Oh.
that lives around here,
Mm-hmm.
like giant green and red birds, like tropical parrots
Uh-huh.
that are just in Los Angeles for no reason. And there are all these theories about how they ended up here. Like there was a sanctuary that closed down, and they just released the birds, or whatever. Nobody knows how, but it's like a couple of hundred birds at this point. And
Wow.
there's a time of year, and that happens to be right now, where they just bounce around. And so sometimes like I walk out my door, and on the power lines, like right across the street, there 120 parrots staring down at me, like screaming and yapping. And again, that is something magical and something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And the people around here get used to it, and it's like, oh, those damn birds again. And it's like, no, no, this is like this is like supernatural almost. And I feel like Hawaii is that, like all of, like everywhere you look, there is something like that happening. And so I wonder what would happen. I would love to move there and live there. I wonder what would happen if I did that. Like I don't know if like my head would explode
Uh-huh.
after after the third week or something like that, or if I would settle in and just get used to it, and be like, wow, another beautiful sunset, and
Mm-hmm.
another but great place. And I love going there. I can't wait to take my daughter there. My daughter is she
Mm-hmm.
turns 5 in about a month, and so she's just kind of getting to the place where she could appreciate something like that. And so and her friend goes, and so she's already starting to say, like, oh yeah, can we go to Hawaii, so
Mm-hmm.
soon.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Any
Cool.
last words to our listeners?
No, I guess other than check out Suicide Jockeys. It is available at your local comic shop right now. It is again a bonkers and meaningful thrill ride. You will enjoy it. You will have fun. You will want more. So go check it out, and check out Aberrant and Banjax. Written a good couple of books. So if you like comics, read them and enjoy them, and then hit me up on Twitter and tell me what you think of them.
All right. Rylend, I wish you all the success for Suicide Jockeys. Rylend, again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your patience too. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank Joshua again from Source Point Press. Thank you, Joshua, for arranging this interview. Thank you very much. And listeners, Suicide Jockeys #1 is out in stores right now. Now, Suicide Jockeys #2, and I only could find the previews code for cover B, and it's now correct me if I'm wrong, the Bullet movie homage cover, correct? Okay.
There's a Bullet homage for #2, a Top Gun homage for #3, and then a Mr. T serial homage for issue 4. So we're throwing 100 miles an hour with the variant covers this time. So yeah.
So Suicide Jockeys comes out #2. It's going to come out on September 29th, and the preview code for that is JUL211961. So and now I want to also thank Drew. Drew, thank you very much. Drew's the co-host for the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. Thank you, Drew, for all your hard work in putting this episode together. Thank you very much. And listeners, if you are a new listener to the show, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. Kyle and Drew talk about spec picks on new releases. And to you, the listeners, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, aloha.